The morning sun had just touched the rooftops in Chennai when Lakshmi Pichai stepped quietly into her auto rickshaw. Her son Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, had no idea she was about to meet the Prime Minister of India. She carried no phone, no bag, and no assistant. Just a small handwritten note and her mother's old sari wrapped around her shoulders. The driver asked where she was going, and she softly replied, "Delhi." It started days ago with a letter. Lakshmi had received it folded under her door. No stamp, no courier name, just her full name written in delicate, respectful handwriting. Inside, it said, "We have watched your son change the world. Now it is time for the world to know where he came from. If you are willing, the Prime Minister would like to meet you. Come quietly, come with your truth." For a moment, she had thought it was a prank, but something in her heart whispered it was real. She did not tell Sundar. She knew he would worry. He would ask too many questions, make calls, put together a media team. But this was not about press or headlines. This was about something deeper. This was about roots. When she reached the airport, an old man in a white kurta was already waiting. He nodded gently and handed her a plane ticket and a cup of chai. No words were exchanged. He only smiled and walked away. The flight to Delhi was quiet. Lakshmi stared out the window, her hands wrapped around the note. She thought about the days when Sundar was just a boy, walking barefoot to the temple with science books in his hand. She remembered him fixing the broken fan with wires from a radio, and how his eyes would light up when he spoke about circuits. People knew Sundar now as a global icon, but only she knew the nights he had gone without dinner so she could eat. Only, she remembered how he once folded his exam paper and used the blank side to draw his first design. Not because he was creative, but because they couldn't afford a notebook that week. At the airport, she was greeted by silence. A black car took her straight to a quiet residence, not the usual government building with heavy security. This place had flowers, birds, and a calmness she didn't expect. A man in a plain beige kurta opened the gate and said, "He is waiting for you inside." She stepped into the garden and saw him. Narendra Modi stood alone by a neem tree, looking up at the branches. When he turned, there was no camera, no official document in his hand, just his eyes, filled with curiosity and something else, respect. "You came," he said gently. Lakshmi nodded. She wasn't sure what she expected, a speech, a formality. But instead, he offered her a chair and said, "Tell me about your son. Not the one we all know, the real one." She looked at the Prime Minister, unsure. "Why?" she asked. He smiled. "Because people need to know that before there was a CEO, there was a mother who believed in him when no one else did. And sometimes, the quiet sacrifices shape the loudest success." Lakshmi's eyes welled up, and so she told him. She spoke of the small kitchen where she cooked on one stove, the nights when they read by candlelight, and how Sundar once refused to go to a birthday party because he didn't want to ask for new clothes. She spoke of her husband's long workdays at the factory, and how they still made sure Sundar had pencils, even if it meant skipping sugar in their tea. Modi listened without interrupting. He didn't take notes. He didn't check his watch. After a long silence, he said, "Do you know what history remembers?" She shook her head. "It remembers those who light candles in silence, while others chase spotlights." Lakshmi looked at him, unsure of what to say. "I want to honor you," he said, "not just as Sundar's mother, but as a symbol of every parent who gave quietly so their child could rise." Her voice was trembling when she replied, "I didn't do anything special." Modi smiled softly. "That's why it's powerful." As the sun began to set, a photographer walked in. He bowed respectfully and asked, "May I?" Lakshmi looked unsure. Modi gently touched her shoulder and said, "This one is not for the newspapers. This one is for history." The picture was taken in silence. Lakshmi standing beside a neem tree, her hands folded, the Prime Minister sitting beside her like an old friend. The sky behind them was turning golden. Then something unexpected happened. Modi handed her a folder. Inside was a plan, a nationwide scholarship named after her, meant for students who came from humble backgrounds, just like Sundar. She looked at the name printed in gold letters, the Lakshmi Pichai Initiative. Her hand trembled. Her eyes filled again. "This," Modi said, "is how we build the next Sundar," she whispered. "He doesn't know I came." Modi looked at her, steady. Maybe he should find out when the first student walks through the door of a college. He couldn't have imagined and sees your name on the gate. Lakshmi was silent for a long time. Then she said, "He'll be proud, not of me, but of what this means." And just like that, history had changed. Not with fanfare, not with fireworks, but with a mother's quiet footsteps, and the heart of a leader who listened. Sundar Pichai was in a conference room in San Francisco when his assistant rushed in quietly. Holding her phone, she whispered, "You need to see this." Sundar looked up, confused. His meetings were usually planned down to the second. Interruptions were rare. She turned the screen toward him. The image loading on the screen wasn't a tech chart or a news headline. It was a photograph, grainy, warm, and surprising. His mother was standing beside the Prime Minister of India, under a neem tree. His heart skipped. He blinked, confused, then reached for the phone. His fingers trembled slightly. "Is this real?" he asked. His assistant only nodded. Sundar leaned back in his chair. His mind raced. His mother had not mentioned anything about traveling. He had spoken to her 2 days ago. She told him she had made sambar for dinner and complained about the price of tomatoes. Nothing unusual. Nothing about Delhi. Nothing about Modi. He stared at the picture again. She looked calm, proud. But there was something else, something he couldn't name. It was the look of a woman who had finally been seen, not just as a mother, but as a person. For a long time, he said nothing. Later that evening he called her. Her voice came through, soft and simple as always. "Sundar beta, are you eating properly?" He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Amma," he said slowly, "why didn't you tell me?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Because if I told you, you would have stopped me. And some things need to be done without permission." But, ... how did it happen? It started with a letter. And then, ... I followed my heart. Sundar sat alone in his office. The city lights behind him blurred in the window. His voice softened. "Amma, you met the Prime Minister?" She replied, "No, Sundar. I met a man who listened." He closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. But the story didn't stop there. By the next morning, news had begun to spread. The photo of Lakshmi Pichai and Modi was now everywhere, from India's top newspapers to online forums in California. People were not just curious, they were inspired. Comments flooded the internet. "This is the mother behind the genius. Humility. Looks like this. A moment in history we didn't know we needed." But with the attention came the questions. Journalists camped outside the Pichai home in Chennai. Camera crews waited outside schools. Neighbors peeked through windows. And yet, Lakshmi remained calm. She opened her window each morning, watered her plants, and offered chai to anyone who came with kind eyes. But not everyone was kind. Some whispered about politics. Some suggested it was staged. Others questioned her silence over the years. Lakshmi ignored the noise, but Sundar did not. He called her again. This time, his voice was firmer. "Amma, let me handle this. I'll release a statement. We can clarify things." She replied gently, "No, Sundar, this isn't about defense, it's about truth." "But what if people?" she interrupted. "Beta, you once told me that real strength is not in what we say, but in what we choose not to explain." Those words silenced him. That same day, the Prime Minister's office released an unexpected video. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It showed Lakshmi sitting under the neem tree again, this time speaking in Tamil with subtitles. Her message was simple. You don't need to be rich to raise someone strong. You just need to believe when no one else does. The video reached millions in a matter of hours. Farmers in Punjab watched it during their tea breaks. School children in Kerala shared it in classrooms. Single mothers in Mumbai held their heads a little higher. Something quiet and powerful had been set into motion. But behind the admiration, something deeper began to grow. Questions were being asked in Parliament. Why weren't more parents like Lakshmi recognized? Why were there no scholarships in her name already? And most importantly, why had it taken a personal meeting with the Prime Minister to spark such a movement? Change began. A group of volunteers launched a grassroots campaign. They called it From Home to Hero. Their goal was to identify families across India who had raised exceptional children under humble circumstances. They didn't want celebrities. They wanted silent warriors. Parents who cooked, cleaned, struggled, sacrificed, but never stopped believing. Lakshmi was now more than a mother. She had become a symbol. Sundar flew to India quietly. He didn't call ahead. He didn't bring press. He walked into his childhood home in Chennai with a small bag and tired eyes. His mother was in the kitchen, making rasa am. He stood there watching. Her Oma, he said softly. She turned, smiled, and said, "Sit. You look thin." He laughed. For the first time in days. After dinner, they sat in the balcony. No cameras, no speeches, just a mother and her son, looking at the stars. "You changed the world," he said. She replied, "You made it possible." "I just lit the lamp." He looked at her, tears in his eyes. "I'm proud of you." Lakshmi reached out and took his hand. "I didn't do this to be known, Sundar. I did this so that the next mother, sitting in a small village, knows her story matters too." He nodded, then asked the question that had been burning in his heart. "Oma, what's next?" She smiled. "We build more stories." The rains came early that year in Chennai. The skies were heavy with clouds, but inside Lakshmi Pichai's home, the mood was brighter than ever. Letters had started arriving from across India. Some were handwritten in Tamil, some typed in Hindi, and others scribbled in broken English, but they all shared one thing: gratitude. A woman from a small town in Bihar wrote, "Because of you, I held my daughter's hand tighter today." A father from Assam shared, "I thought I failed my son because we couldn't afford a school bag. After hearing your story, I realized I gave him something more powerful: faith." Lakshmi read every single letter. She sorted them by region, language, and age group. Then she placed them in a cloth-bound book she titled Voices from Home. She didn't want to lose a single word. Meanwhile, the Lakshmi Pichai initiative was quietly gaining strength. Without flashy announcements, the first set of scholarships had been awarded. The selection was done not through tests, but through stories. Students wrote essays about their families, their struggles, their dreams. The ones with the quietest strength were chosen. One boy from Orissa wrote, "I study under a street lamp. My mother sells vegetables. She tells me my mind is bigger than our house." A girl from Madhya Pradesh said, "I want to be an astronaut because my father once told me that the sky never says no." When Lakshmi read their words, she wept. She wasn't the only one moved. Sundar Pichai, now back in California, began to shift things quietly at Google. He set up an internal program called Roots, a mentorship initiative for students from underserved backgrounds. No fanfare, no headlines, just engineers, designers, and thinkers reaching back to pull others forward. But not everyone supported the movement. A group of critics claimed it was sentimental. Others said it was political theater. They asked why the Prime Minister gave attention to just one family, one mother. They questioned the timing, the silence, the motives. On a national talk show, a guest smirked and said, "She's just a mother, not a policymaker." The clip went viral, but instead of anger, something unexpected happened. A flood of responses poured in. "Just a mother. She raised a man who leads a billion devices. If a mother's love isn't policy, what is? Give me one Lakshmi Pichai, over 100 speeches. Within days, the phrase "just a mother" had turned into a badge of honor. T-shirts were printed, school murals painted. Even children in remote villages started writing essays titled, "Just a Mother." Lakshmi heard about it all, but she remained grounded. One day, a reporter finally got through and asked her directly, "What do you think about being called just a mother?" She smiled and said, "I am just a mother, and that is enough." That night, Sundar called her again. This time, he didn't say much. He just listened. He listened to her describe the school she wanted to build next. She had found an empty piece of land near her childhood village. She didn't want a big building. She wanted an open space, with trees and sunlight and books kept on floor mats, where children could learn without fear. Education, she said, should feel like morning air, not prison walls. She was working with architects, retired teachers, and volunteers who traveled by bus from 3 different cities. Some brought chalk, others brought food, but they all brought belief. Sundar offered to fund the whole thing. Lakshmi gently refused. "This one," she said, "should belong to the people, not to money." So Sundar helped in silence. He sent notebooks, solar lights, even an old server for internet access, but never put his name on anything. Just a small message in each package: keep learning. The first classroom opened under a banyan tree. The first lesson taught was not math or science, it was storytelling. A local grandmother came and told the children how she survived the floods of 1964 by holding on to her father's shoulder and singing lullabies to stay calm. "Your story," she told the class, "is the one thing nobody can steal." Slowly, Lakshmi's school became more than a school. It became a meeting ground. Mothers came there to learn how to read. Fathers came to ask how to help their children study better. One night, a group of young boys showed up with guitars and asked, "Can we sing here every Sunday?" Lakshmi simply nodded. The Prime Minister heard about the school and sent a personal letter. He wrote, "When leaders give orders, it changes minds. But when mothers build schools, it changes generations." But then something unexpected happened. Again, an international foundation contacted Sundar. They wanted to nominate Lakshmi Pichai for a Global Human Spirit Award. It was a prestigious honor, given only once a decade. Past recipients included world peace advocates and freedom fighters. Sundar hesitated. He knew what his mother would say, so he called her. "As always, Amma," he said, "they want to give you an award." "For what?" she asked. "For being you." She laughed quietly. "Then give it to every mother who made rice with only salt, but still sang bedtime songs." He smiled. "They want you to speak at the ceremony." She paused. "Then I will go. But only if they let me speak in Tamil." And just like that, Lakshmi Pichai prepared to leave India again, not to meet a world leader this time, but to speak to the world itself. Her message would be simple, that real power is not loud, it is quiet, it is soft, it is the voice of a mother, saying, "You can do it, even when the world says otherwise." The plane touched down in Geneva under a soft, gray sky. Lakshmi Pichai stepped off slowly, her hand clutching a small cloth bag. She wore the same simple cotton sari she had worn when she first met the Prime Minister, clean-pressed, but nothing expensive. Inside the bag was a notebook filled with handwritten thoughts, and a small photo of Sundar when he was 10. Smiling with a gap between his front teeth, her translator met her at the gate with a warm smile and said, "Madam, they are very excited to hear you." Lakshmi only nodded as she entered the hotel where the event was held. The organizers offered to buy her a designer shawl, give her a professional speechwriter, and arrange a rehearsal. She gently refused all 3. "Truth doesn't need rehearsal," she said softly. That evening, the hall filled with over 2,000 people. There were prime ministers, business leaders, and activists from around the world. Banners read, celebrating the quiet changemakers. Lights sparkled, cameras flashed, and then, all at once, the room fell silent. Lakshmi walked slowly to the stage. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just her sari and her presence. The announcer introduced her as the mother of one of the most influential men in technology. Lakshmi stood behind the podium, cleared her throat gently, and spoke in Tamil. Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with something rare truth, without performance. Her translator spoke after each sentence. "I am not here because of power," she began. "I am here because I once told my son, study well, even if the fan doesn't work and the light bulb flickers." The room leaned in when my son became CEO. People asked what I had taught him. I told them, I taught him how to be kind when no one is looking. She told them about her small home, the leaking roof during monsoons, the lunchboxes packed with the same rice, 3 days in a row. She spoke of her husband's long hours at the factory, her own efforts to stretch every rupee, and the nights they prayed not for riches, but for strength. "We did not raise him to be successful," she said. "We raised him to be good." The hall was completely still. Then she said something that no one expected. "You call me strong because I raised a successful son, but I ask you, what about the mother whose son failed his exams, but still tried again the next day? Is she not strong too?" Applause rose slowly, then deeply. "You honor me tonight, but I accept this not for myself. I accept this for every woman who makes tea before the sun rises, who walks miles to send her daughter to school, who holds back her tears so her child feels brave." She paused, looked out at the crowd, and said one final thing. "Greatness is not built in boardrooms. It is built in kitchens, in silence, and in love." When she finished, the hall stood up, not out of formality, but out of emotion. Many had tears in their eyes. Some bowed, others simply clapped and kept clapping. Backstage, reporters gathered. A young woman from a European news channel asked, "Madam Pichai, what is your message to the youth of the world?" Lakshmi smiled gently and said, "Listen to your mother, and if she is no longer with you, listen to her in your heart." The speech spread like fire online, translated into dozens of languages. It reached remote towns and giant cities. People posted quotes from it. Mothers in villages sent voice notes to their children. College students printed her lines on bookmarks. In India, schools began organizing Uma Days, where students honored their mothers with letters and small plays. It was not about Femet, it was about remembering who stood behind every story of success. But not all reactions were joyful. In a high-level boardroom at a global company, one executive said sarcastically, "So now motherhood is a global brand." Another replied, "No, now it's finally being seen as leadership." Lakshmi returned home quietly. As usual, there were no garlands, no banners, just her slippers by the door, and the smell of tamarind rice in the kitchen. Sundar called that night. He had watched her speech live. His voice was soft. He said, "You just made the whole world cry." Lakshmi laughed. "Not the whole world, Beta. Just the parts that still remember what love sounds like." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What now?" And this time, Lakshmi had a plan. "Now we open 100 more schools," she said. "Not mine. Theirs." Sundar didn't understand. "Whose schools?" "The mothers," she said. "We find the ones who never got a chance. We help them build schools in their names." She had already begun. Volunteers had found 20 women in rural India who had raised strong children despite having no education of their own. She wanted to name each school after one of them. The first school was named Shanti Devi after a woman who used to sell guavas on a roadside but sent all 3 of her children to college. The second was Fatima Learner Center, named after a widow who taught girls sewing in a one-room house during a flood. The idea spread like wind. Donations came in from unknown people. Engineers sent old laptops. Artists offered to paint murals. Local farmers helped lay bricks. The schools were built not with money but with hope. One day, a child wrote on a chalkboard at a new school in Uttar Pradesh, "We are not just learning ABC, we are learning to believe." Lakshmi visited that school and cried for the first time. In public, someone asked her, "Are you overwhelmed by what you've created?" She looked around at the tiny feet running barefoot across the courtyard and said, "I didn't create this. They did. I just lit a match." But soon, another challenge came. A major international donor offered a large sum of money, but with conditions. They wanted to put their foundation's name on the schools, their logos on the uniforms, and their quotes on the walls. Lakshmi said no. When asked why, she replied simply, "If you want to help, do it quietly. If you want to be seen, take a photo. But don't touch the walls that belong to our mothers." Many were stunned by her boldness, but others clapped louder than ever. In that moment, Lakshmi Pichai became something more. She was no longer just a mother. She was a movement. Monsoon season poured over India, but in a remote village in Rajasthan, children still came to school with wet hair and muddy feet. They laughed, they learned, they sat cross-legged on mats, and they spoke about a woman they had never met. "Pichai, she's the mother of the Google man," one child whispered. "No," another corrected. "She's the one who said greatness begins in the kitchen." Their teacher smiled. "She's both." The Mothers of Change movement had now spread to 17 states. It was no longer just a scholarship or a few schools. It had become a network, a growing map of small places where big dreams were being born. Each center was named after a woman who had once gone unseen. In Punjab, there was Baljit Kaur Library, run by her granddaughter. In Bengal, the Anjali Bose School for Girls opened under a mango tree. In Andhra Pradesh, a learning shed carried the name of Malathi Uma, who never went to school but raised 4 teachers. Lakshmi Pichai visited each one quietly. She traveled by bus, sometimes by bike, once even by boat. She took notes in her diary, never posted on social media, and always ate lunch with the students. Her rule was simple: no ceremonies, no microphones, only stories. But change was never easy. One day, in a meeting with state officials, she was told bluntly, "Madam, your movement is lovely, but it's not sustainable." She replied, "Kindness is never a waste. It always finds a way to grow." They frowned. "Without government structure, it will collapse." Lakshmi looked up, her voice calm but firm. "Then build a structure that learns from mothers." That evening, she wrote a letter by hand to the Prime Minister. She asked for no funds, no spotlight, only one thing: to allow local schools to adopt the mother-naming model if they wished. A week later, she received a call. Modi's voice was warm. "Your request is approved." Lakshmi whispered. "Thank you." He added, "You are not just building schools. You are rewriting how we see legacy." The news broke nationally. Overnight, more than 2,000 schools applied to rename one of their halls or libraries after local mothers. Some were alive, some had passed on, but all had left behind children who rose because someone once believed in them. Meanwhile, Sundar Pichai was watching from afar. In an internal Google meeting, he paused a product launch to speak about his mother's mission. His team expected a short comment. Instead, Sundar shared a new idea. "Let's build something small that creates something huge," he said. His proposal was simple: a free online learning portal called Amma Learns, designed for mothers across the world. It would offer basic education, tech skills, and emotional support, all in local languages. No ads, no branding, just access. Within weeks, the first pilot launched in India, Kenya, and the Philippines. The landing page showed a single image: a pair of worn hands holding a pencil. Lakshmi saw it late one night. she called Sundar, tears in her voice. You remembered. I never forgot, he replied. But even as the movement grew, an unexpected challenge arrived. A major international news agency published an opinion piece titled The Myth of the Humble Mother. It questioned whether Lakshmi's story was exaggerated, whether she truly came from poverty, and whether her fame was being used to mask deeper political agendas. The article spread quickly. Some called it brave journalism. Others called it disrespectful. Lakshmi. Read the article alone. She did not cry. Instead, she walked to the school nearest to her house and sat with the students. She asked them, "Have you ever been doubted?" They all raised their hands. She smiled gently. "Then welcome. You are now part of something real." Sundar was furious. He called her and said, we can sue them. We can correct the record. We can." She interrupted him kindly. "No, Beta. This is not about fighting. This is about continuing." She picked up a small notebook and read a letter she had received that morning. It was from a girl in Guwahati. "Dear Amma," it said, "my mother is a maid. She cannot read or write. But today, she came to school with me and learned to write her name for the first time. She cried when she finished. I told her about you. She said, 'Then I will try again tomorrow. Thank you.'" Lakshmi closed the notebook and said, "This is my answer." The story didn't die. Instead, the backlash only made her message stronger. Media houses scrambled to follow up with new coverage. Celebrities posted apologies for not speaking up sooner. Students started campaigns using the hashtag #MyRealHero and shared photos of their mothers with stories of strength. One young boy posted a video of his mother patching his torn school bag and said, "She's not on a stamp, but she's my greatest teacher." Lakshmi watched quietly. She didn't chase approval. She never wanted fame. But the world had seen something in her that it was hungry for: truth without filter, humility without performance, strength without arrogance. One morning, she received a visitor. A woman in her 60s, with silver hair and worn slippers, knocked on her door. "I came from Bihar," she said. "All the way here?" Lakshmi asked. "Yes," the woman replied. "I wanted to see with my own eyes if you were real." Lakshmi smiled and offered her tea. They sat together in silence. After a long pause, the woman said, "You are not what I imagined." "I never am," Lakshmi said softly. The woman left a small bundle behind. Inside it was a brass lamp, blackened with age. "Light this in your next school," she said. "It belonged to my mother." Lakshmi placed the lamp on her shelf. She lit it every morning after that. By the end of the year, the movement had reached 5 countries. A new school was opening in Uganda, named after a woman who raised 3 daughters during Civil War. Another was built in Brazil, honoring a grandmother who taught neighborhood children to read with scraps of paper and a broken mirror. And still, Lakshmi's own home remained the same. Her kitchen, her courtyard, her old radio. She refused to move. The morning air in Chennai was crisp and quiet when Lakshmi Pichai stepped outside her gate, holding a small clay lamp. The streets around her had begun to stir. Nearby vendors set up their carts. School children, still yawning, waited for their buses. And down the road, someone swept leaves with an old broom. Today was no ordinary day. Today marked 1 year since the photograph under the neem tree had quietly changed the course of thousands of lives. Lakshmi didn't announce anything. She simply lit the lamp, placed it on the edge of the stone wall outside her home, and whispered a prayer. It was a prayer not for herself, not even for Sundar. It was for every parent who had once felt invisible, for every mother who skipped her meal to fill a child's plate, for every father who stayed silent in pain so his children wouldn't worry, for every grandparent who watched the world change but never stopped giving their wisdom. Across India and the world, people lit their own lamps to. In Delhi, a student lit a candle in a college dorm room and messaged his mother, "I see you now." In Kenya, A single mother gathered her children and told them the story of the Indian woman who built schools with no fame, only belief. In Brazil, a teacher stood before her class and said, "Today, we honor a quiet revolution." But Lakshmi stayed home. She had refused an invitation from the United Nations to attend a ceremony in New York. She had also declined a book deal and a film offer. "Some things," she said, "are not meant to be sold." Instead, she sat in her garden, notebook in hand, listing new names, new mothers, new villages, new schools. Her son, Sundar, arrived. That afternoon, he didn't bring gifts or flowers, just himself and 2 cups of filtered coffee. He sat beside her on the veranda. "Amma," he said gently, "do you know what today is?" "Yes," she replied, sipping slowly. "It's just another day to do a little more." He smiled. "You could rest, you know. I rest when a child no longer needs to worry about choosing between books and food." He nodded. They sat in silence for a while. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a package. It was wrapped in brown paper. "A gift," he said. Lakshmi hesitated. Inside the paper was a small framed piece of paper, hand-inked, aged beautiful. "This, Sundar," said, "is the first patent ever filed in your name." She stared at it, confused. "What for?" "For a model school design," he explained. "I took your courtyard plan and turned it into an open-source blueprint. Now, anyone in the world can build a school like yours, anywhere." Her hands trembled. "Why my name?" "Because it started with you." Lakshmi touched the glass gently. "But so many others helped. They will all be remembered." But they needed someone to remind them what was possible. For the first time in many months, Lakshmi allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness, not from fame, but from the quiet joy of seeing belief turned into action. Weeks later, the blueprint titled The Amma School Model was uploaded in 22 languages. Within a month, it was downloaded over 500,000 times. Families in Nigeria, Peru, Cambodia, and Nepal began planning their own learning spaces. None of them were rich. Many didn't even have electricity, but they had willpower. And now, they had a design born from one mother's kitchen. But history had one more twist left. On the anniversary evening, the Prime Minister returned to the Neem tree. This time, he wasn't alone. He was joined by school children from around the country. Each one had been chosen not for grades, but for stories of persistence, of compassion, of sacrifice, and in the center of the gathering, a surprise waited for Lakshmi. A stone plaque, carved with care. It read, "In honor of the mothers who believed before the world did." Inspired by Lakshmi Pichai. She stood there, eyes wide. Modi turned to her and said softly, "You began something we can never measure." She looked at the children surrounding them. "They are the measurement." A little girl stepped forward and handed Lakshmi a flower. "I want to be a school builder too," she said shyly. Lakshmi knelt beside her and whispered, "Then begin with kindness." That night, under a canopy of stars, music played quietly in the garden. It wasn't from speakers. It came from children humming songs passed down from their mothers. There were no speeches, no press, only candles, and hearts full of warmth. Lakshmi sat on the same bench beneath the neem tree and thought of her own mother. She imagined her smile, her voice, the sound of her sari brushing against the kitchen counter. "Thank you," she whispered into the wind bait, because in the end, the story was never just about her. It was about the quiet power of belief, the kind that grows in silence, the kind that does not seek credit, the kind that lights the world, one home at a time. The sun rose gently over the rooftops of Chennai. Its golden light spilled across narrow lanes, touched old doors, and warmed the tiles of Lakshmi Pichai's home. Birds sang, as they always did. Dogs barked in the distance, and inside her small kitchen Lakshmi stirred the morning simper, humming an old lullaby. Everything seemed the same, But across India and now, the world, nothing was quite the same anymore. Lakshmi Pichai had become a quiet force that moved across borders and languages, without needing translation. Not as a celebrity, not as a politician, but as a reminder that behind every great achievement, there is often someone who never asked for applause. Today was different, though today, something new was about to begin. A few months earlier, an idea had taken shape between Sundar and Lakshmi during a quiet walk in the village. It was simple. Like all her best ideas, Amma Sundar had asked, "What if we brought all the mothers together?" "What for?" she had replied. "To meet, to speak, to learn from each other." She had thought for a moment, then said, "Call it the Ummah Summit." He smiled. "You just named the future." Now, on this special day, the Ummah Summit had become real. A gathering of women from every corner of India and beyond was set to begin. Mothers, teachers, farmers, tailors, widows, and grandmothers had all arrived in Chennai, not in limousines, not in headlines. They arrived with tiffin boxers, plastic bags filled with gifts from home, and hearts full of stories. The summit grounds were unlike any conference. Instead of glass walls and air conditioning, there were bamboo tents, floor mats, and open libraries. Each space was named after a woman who had made a difference. Instead of VIP rows, every chair was the same. Instead of opening speeches, the first hour was spent sharing food. Lakshm, I stood at the entrance, greeting every woman with folded hands. "You came from far," she would say, and each would reply, "But I already knew the way. I've been walking toward this my whole life." At the heart of the summit was something no one expected, a circle, not a stage, not a screen, a simple circle drawn with chalk on the ground. Inside that circle, one by one, women stepped forward and told their truth. A woman from Tamil Nadu said, "I raised 5 children by selling jasmine flowers. Today, one of them teaches children of blind parents. I never thought my story mattered. Now I know it does." A grandmother from Sri Lanka said, "I lost everything in war, but I taught my granddaughter to read from ashes and memory. Today, she writes poems." And then, someone unexpected stepped forward. It was Sundar. He entered the circle slowly and sat on the floor with the others. When it was his turn, he stood and spoke simply. "My name is Sundar, but you already know that. What you may not know is that my mother once gave up her only gold bangle to pay for my entrance exam. She never told me. I found out much later. She told me it didn't matter, but it did. Everything she did mattered." The crowd listened in complete silence. Then he looked at Lakshmi. "Amma," he said, "you taught me that greatness is not in being known. It's in helping someone else be seen." He sat back down. No fanfare, no lights, just the truth. And that was enough. As the summit continued, plans were made, not by governments, but by women. One group decided to build a community kitchen for children who came to school hungry. Another planned a series of books written in local languages by mothers who had never gone to school themselves. One small group from Nepal began, drawing their first school blueprint on the back of old newspapers. And as the sun began to set, candles were lit around the summit grounds. Each candle carried a name, not of leaders, not of brands, but of mothers. Kalpana, Zubeda, Shalini, Rosalina, Fatima, Devaki.A. Quiet Field became a map of memory and firelight. Lakshmi stood in the center, watching. A little girl approached her, holding a notebook. "Can you sign this?" the girl asked. Lakshmi smiled. "What should I write?" "Write something you would want me to remember when I grow up." The girl said. Lakshm. I thought for a moment. Then she wrote, "Even when no one claps, walk forward. You are changing the world just by showing up." The girl hugged her tightly. Later, that night, Sundar sat beside his mother again. No cameras, no speeches, just the two of them under a sky filled with stars. You know, he said, people keep calling you a global symbol now. Lakshmi chuckled. I'm still just a woman who makes rasam and forgets where she kept her glasses. And yet, you've made more impact than most presidents, he said. She looked up at the sky. Maybe, she said softly, but only because I never wanted to be anything else but kind. And then, as if on cue, the first fireflies appeared in the garden. Tiny lights, quiet, unnoticed, yet powerful enough to glow in the dark. The story of Lakshmi Pichai was never about one woman, it was about millions. It was about mothers who taught with stories instead of books, about fathers who gave without pride, about people who believed quietly, and about a world that finally decided to listen, not with applause, but with action, not with fame, but with faith.